of Liverpool.
My Lords, in moving amendments 1, 20 and 27, I would first like to thank Lord Blencathra, Baroness Northover and Lord Coker, who have signed one or all of the amendments, a clear signal from across the House that the bill must be strengthened to deal firstly with companies who have been banned in other jurisdictions, secondly the need to dig deeper into ownership and investment of companies, and thirdly the desirability of acting in concert with our allies in Five Eyes. These amendments sit comfortably alongside the call that we heard at second reading for additional parliamentary scrutiny, which the Intelligence and Security Committee has called for. At second reading, Lady Morgan of Coates said we should focus on what other nations are doing. Quotes, we have allies around the world, and we want to be able to work with other companies and countries around the world to make sure we have that diversity in the supply chain. On November the 30th, 2020, the Secretary of State told the House of Commons on that we must never find ourselves in this position again. Over the last few decades, countless countries across the world have become over-reliant on too few vendors. During our debate, Lord Young of Cookham told us other countries in the free world face the same challenges as the United Kingdom. Lady Stroud urged us to work in close partnership with our Five Eyes allies, reminding us that we have known that Huawei is a security risk since 2013, enabling us to avoid what Lady Merron described as another costly security debacle. And my noble and gallant friend, Lord Stirrup, told us we need to develop an approach that constantly monitors and rebalances this equation in the context of our complex and dynamic world. These amendments seek to address many of those points. During second reading, noble lords referred to companies which have caused security concerns in other jurisdictions, including Huawei, TikTok, ZTE Corporation, which the government have named as a high-risk vendor, Hytera Communications Corporation Limited, Duha Technology Company Limited, Hangzhou Hikvision Digital Company. I'll return to Hikvision later. At second reading, the noble Lord Fox said that the bill's headline is, I quote, the ban and purchase of new Huawei equipment. And, like Baroness Northover and Lady Bennet, he referred to the genocide against Uyghurs in Xinjiang. My Lords, I serve as Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Uyghurs and am a patron of the Coalition for Genocide Response. Following the House of Commons decision to name a genocide in Xinjiang, only last week the Foreign Affairs Select Committee published a damning report calling for a much stronger response from the government. These amendments, like those to the trade bill, which the House passed with three-figure majorities, are a modest attempt to force that stronger and effective response. The noble Lord Blencathra has frequently pointed to the way Chinese companies can fundamentally compromise our infrastructure and through subsidies asphyxiate UK industry. The 1 billion lateral flow tests that we bought from the CCP are a glaring example. These amendments specifically address the telecommunications sector, but they provide a roadmap which could be emulated in other strategic sectors. Finding ways to protect our strategic industries has never been more important. Last week we learnt that in a deal estimated to be worth £63 million, the Newport wafer fab, the UK's largest producer of semiconductors, has been acquired by the Chinese-owned manufacturer Nexperia. Nexperia is a Dutch firm, but owned by China's Wingtech. Newport wafer fab is the UK's largest producer of silicone chips, vital in products from TVs and mobile phones to cars and games consoles. This acquisition is happening during an increasingly severe global shortage of computer chips. Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, said that the government was monitoring the situation closely, quotes, but does not consider it appropriate to intervene at the current time. Perhaps the noble Baroness, the Minister, could tell us when she comes to reply why it wasn't appropriate and when would be the right time to protect a key national asset, and whether, following the Prime Minister's subsequent expression of concern, the acquisition is being reviewed under the National Security and Investment Act, which at second reading we were all told would protect key national assets from dangerous foreign takeovers. My Lords, there's a lamentable lack of strategic coherence or consistency in our approach. We have Lord Grimstone saying on one hand he wants to deepen trade deals with China, while the Foreign Secretary tells us slave labour in Xinjiang is on an industrial scale. We have the Integrated Review telling us that China is a threat to the United Kingdom, but the Business Secretary telling us it's not appropriate to do anything at the present time. This predatory absorption of our semiconductor industry is inimical to the material interests of our technology companies and to national security. Our committee should carefully consider what is at stake here and why these amendments are so very relevant. Has the government examined what is happening within the same sector in other jurisdictions, for instance? What assessment has been made of the dependency by United Kingdom manufacturers on China for imports of critical technologies such as semiconductors and semiconductor devices? The applicability of these amendments by generating a review of other practices in other regions is, of course, self-evident. We're starting with telecoms, but the same lessons can apply across the board. Let me also pursue an issue which the Noble Lord Fox and I raised at second reading. The Noble Baroness was asked about companies which operate and own CCTV security networks. UK local authorities are reviewing contracts for CCTV equipment made by Hikvision. This is being used to enforce China's surveillance state, of course, in Xinjiang, but it's also operating CCTV equipment the length and breadth of Britain. My lords, is that wise? Hikvision is banned in the United States, but not here. Simple question to the Noble Baroness, which I put at second reading, and I put again, why not? Last week in their report, Never Again, the UK's responsibility to act on atrocities in Xinjiang and beyond, the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee said this: cameras made by the Chinese firm Hikvision have been deployed throughout Xinjiang and provide the primary camera technology used in the internment camps. They heard concerns that, quotes, facial recognition cameras made by companies such as Hikvision operating in the UK are collecting facial recognition data which can then be used by the Chinese government. Dr. Hoffman, who was one of the witnesses giving evidence to the Select Committee, said that Hikvision cameras are operating all over London. Independent reports suggest that Hikvision cameras are operating throughout the UK in areas such as Kensington and Chelsea, Guildford and Coventry, placed in leisure centres and even schools. The committee concluded, and I quote, equipment manufactured by companies such as Hikvision and Dahua should not be permitted to operate within the UK. We recommend that the government prohibits organisations and individuals in the UK from doing business with any companies known to be associated with the Xinjiang atrocities through the sanctions regime. The government should prohibit UK firms and public sector bodies from conducting business with investing in or entering into partnerships with such Chinese firms. So, my lords, will we? It would be good to hear from the Noble Baroness. In parenthesis, the committee also registered concerns about, and I quote, substantial research connections between the Chinese organisations responsible for these crimes and UK universities, and said the role of advanced technologies in the use of oppression in Xinjiang cannot be ignored. My lords, at second reading, the Minister referred to the report into export licences. The Select Committee complains that the government has not made clear when the urgent export review will be concluded. The crisis in Xinjiang is far too urgent for delay. It would again be good to hear from the Noble Baroness on that specific point about export licences. Can we at least be told what plans the government has to impose import and export controls on firms linked to China military-civil fusion programmes? And are we acting in concert with our allies, as these amendments require, over Hikvision? As in the US, will this bill be used or amended to enable us to ban them? The Select Committee also referred to our duties under the 2015 Modern Slavery Act, and I refer to my interests as a trustee of the charity Arise Foundation. The committee report says, quotes, the issue of forced labour in Xinjiang is pervasive and widespread. In the government's own words, no business can consider themselves immune from the risks of modern slavery. My Lords, this too is information which has been assessed in other jurisdictions and deemed to raise ethical and security issues of which we should make ourselves aware, as these amendments would require us to do. I can think of no compelling reason other than vested interest as to why we wouldn't want to know what other jurisdictions are doing about these issues. And turning again to telecoms, the argument for more concerted action was put well in the context of Huawei by Senator Marco Rubio, who said rejecting Huawei wouldn't mean the UK going it alone, but joining a coalition of like-minded countries determined to ensure effective market-based alternatives to Huawei are available. My Lords, he is right. Have we examined this? Are we doing the same? As long ago as 2018, the US put in place a block on ZTE, China's second largest maker of telecommunications equipment, because of the violation of sanctions against Iran and North Korea. It's designated ZTE as, I quote, a national security threat, with government telecommunication funds banned from buying equipment from ZTE. Are we doing the same? In April, the Department of Commerce added 7 Chinese supercomputing entities to the list, with Gina Raimondo, the US Secretary of Commerce, insisting that, and I quote, the Department of Commerce will use the full extent of its authorities to prevent China from leveraging US technologies to support these destabilizing military modernization efforts. The US has gone further in examining investments, as these amendments do. New Clause 15 would require us to examine what others are doing in this respect. President Biden has issued an executive order banning US investors from trading shares in China Mobile, China Unicom, and China Telecom. The list of firms in which the US firms cannot invest comes to more than 60. My Lords, I won't read out the full list today, but I have sent it to the Noble Baroness, the Minister, who has kindly acknowledged receipt, and I'm grateful. Among those listed are a number specifically connected to surveillance technology, including China Telecommunications Corporation, China United Network Communications Group, Shangzhou Hikvision Digital Technology, Huawei Technologies, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, China Mobile Limited, China Telecom Corporation Limited. But it's not just the US. Australia is another of our closest allies and a core member of Five Eyes, which is specifically mentioned in these amendments. In blocking an Australian $300 million takeover offer by China State Construction Engineering Company, Australia cited national security grounds. As long ago as 2016, Australia forbade a deal on the basis that China's subsidies rendered it difficult for Australian bidders to make a competitive bid, with the National Treasurer saying it may be contrary to the national interest. In 2020, The Guardian Australia reported links between companies operating in sensitive sectors, including its National Science Research Agency and technology companies, and operatives from the Chinese intelligence agencies, with one reported as having ties to the CCP's United Front Work Department, a foreign influence body of the CCP, described by President Xi Jinping as, I quote, an important magic weapon. Future threats to the UK's telecommunications network may not come from as high-profile global brands as Huawei. It's vital that the UK takes into account the experiences and views of its allies when considering the risks associated with a certain vendor or operator. That is what these amendments require us to do. Coordination with allies bolsters UK security. Coordination with allies protects against threats from China. Failure to take a coordinated approach with key allies on telecommunication security undermines the functioning of long-standing security arrangements which protect the UK's security interests. And recall too, my Lords, that US officials warned that the UK's failure to ban Huawei could have jeopardised Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangements. These amendments will ensure that the views of key allies will be taken into account in reviewing the threats posed by high-risk vendors. Bear in mind, too, that the failure to coordinate with allies also leads to costs, a point made by my noble friend Earl Errol during the second reading debate. It leads to costs and to uncertainty for business. Standing together will also help us to see off the threats which the CCP makes, such as telling us that banning Huawei from the 5G network would cost Britain dearly in investment. Similar threats have been made against Germany, Australia and Sweden as they considered taking action against Huawei's security risks. Taking a coordinated approach with allies will help protect against these threats, making it harder for the Chinese government to single out any one country for retaliation. Earlier collective action could have prevented the later expensive U-turns. The government's own estimates calculated that belated Huawei's decisions cost £2 billion, excluding the broader economic costs of the delayed rollout of the 5G network caused by changing policies. To end, my lords, belatedly and at great cost, that was the right thing to do. But let's not make the same expensive and dangerous mistakes again. These amendments seek to better protect our national interests in concert with our allies in the free world. I beg to move.